Hello and welcome to Tech Deal's graphics card performance comparison. Today we are testing 4 different graphics cards. The RX 570 4GB card against the GTX 1060 3GB card, the RX 580 8GB card against the GTX 1060 6GB card. Now these cards range in price from about $170 to about $250 when I'm filming this in 2017. There will be links in the video description below to both Amazon and Newegg for all 4 sets of graphics cards. By all means, compare prices and buy it where it makes the most sense to you. All 4 cards were installed in the same computer. It's my $1,500 i7 7700K build running at a fixed 4.7 GHz on all 4 cores. Link to that build video in the video description below. Fraps was used for the frame performance numbers you will see at the end of this video, but it was not used to capture any of this video. Instead, an external Elgato HD60S hardware capture card was used plugged into a separate computer, so there is no performance loss for having captured this video. You are watching the actual video that the performance numbers at the end of the video is used for. Finally, the numbers in green at the top left corner of the screen are from MSI Afterburner, a free program you can download and use to monitor your system's performance in real time while playing games. This is a very handy tool to figure out what is the limitation to your system's performance. Is it your CPU, your RAM, your graphics card? I use this all the time, and if you want to find out what the bottleneck or limit in your system is, I recommend you do so as well. Starting off with the RX 570 4GB card, we are playing Battlefield 1 at 1080p at ultra detail, and look at our frame rate. We're getting 76, 77 frames per second. Now, that's a real-time number. It doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be our average or anywhere close to where our minimum is going to be at, because this game's frame rate is all over the place depending upon what's going on. Here we are at the map. Now it's dipped down a bit much, so it does vary depending upon where you're at. Now we are in multiplayer mode, and unfortunately these games are not on the same map. Trying to get 4 games in a row on different machines on the same map is eternally difficult. Yes, I suppose I could create custom matches, I could do the campaign mode, but the reality is I'm looking for the big multiplayer maps. Campaign mode plays fine, it's not stressful, and I don't think that plus 6 months post-game launch, campaign mode is what most people want to see. You want to see 64-player multiplayer. You want to see the big, huge conquest maps, the capture the flags, to see how well it plays when there's a lot of stuff going on. The downside is that the maps are different. So when you look at the game performance numbers at the end of the video, take them in generalities. Consider that frame performance is going to vary 5 or 10 frames a second, plus or minus, depending upon which map we're on. It just is what it is. This RX 570 is the Sapphire Mini ITX card. 1 fan, short, and small heatsink. That is why the fan is turning at 1500 RPM and the temperature is 70 degrees Celsius. If you look at our real-time numbers, you will see that the clock speed of this card is not really all that great. If you've actually looked up what the reference speeds and the overclock speeds on some of the better RX 570s are, 1200 megahertz is a little on the slow side. By comparison, my Asus Republic of Gamers RX 570 Strix card runs at a solid 1300 MHz without complaint. The issue is, in April of 2017 when I made this video, that card is $190. Why is that a problem, you say? Because for $10 more you can have an RX 580, completely negating the point of the card. So the value of these cards is only when you can get them for a reasonable price. Now I paid $170 for this, and even that's marginal. Is it worth $30 more for an entry-level RX 580 4GB card over this? Yes, actually I think it is, because the base level RX 580 runs at least 1350 MHz. That is a nearly 200 MHz clock speed difference on the card for $30, or roughly 15% of the price. But wait, it gets more. The RAM speed on the RX 580 is 2 GHz, well, base speed not counting the GDDR, whereas the RAM speed here is 1750. In addition to that, the RX 570 has about 15% fewer shaders. on the card rather than the RX 580. Now, having just all said that, many of you may be going, why on earth are we even looking at the RX 570? It sounds like a terrible deal. It is at the current prices, but I make these videos for the length of the card's life, not just for the day of release. The RX 570s, when they are within $20 or $30 of the price of RX 580s, make 0 cents. But if you look back to the launch of the RX 470 and 480 back in the summer of 2016, that same situation existed. However, within a couple of months of the card's launch, the RX 470s got cheaper really quickly, and you could, by fall, find RX 470s at or below $150. If you can find RX 570s at or below $150, that completely changes the equation, and then yes, they are worth considering. So I'm putting it on video, so whether now, a week from now, a month from now, 2 months from now, you watch this video and you go, hey, what are you talking about? There's like a $50 price difference between the cards. Great, buy the 570. I do recommend that you buy the 2-fan RX 570, not the 1-fan card. The whole purpose of the 1-fan card is to fit into many ITX systems and pre-built systems, but you pay for that small size in higher fan speed, more noise, lower clock speed, higher temperatures, less overall performance. Buy the 2-fan card if you at all can. Now, while Battlefield 1 is not a brand new game that came out last week, it is less than a year old. It's also a game that tends to use more than 4 cores. Now, I'm saying this as we're dead, and it's currently using 42% of our CPU, which is definitely less than 4 cores, but not to worry, there's times when it goes above that. It's heavy combat when there's a lot of enemies around you. That's where it really comes into play. Our main system RAM usage is just under 8 gigabytes, so while it will run in 8 gigs of RAM, there's nothing left for a disk cache or anything else running in the background. I highly recommend 16 gigs of RAM, as I've said many times on my channel in the past. Now, VRAM usage. Look at our VRAM usage. We are at 3.6 gigabytes of VRAM. Many people have commented in the past, see, clearly games need more than 3 gigs of VRAM. That GTX 1060 3 gig doesn't have a chance. It's going to be laggy and slow, right? Oh, au contraire. That's why it's in this test. Wait for the results at the end or watch them in real time. Just because games allocate VRAM doesn't mean they require it. It doesn't mean that they can't work with less VRAM. So how much MSI Afterburner says you're using is not necessarily what they need. The only way to know how much video RAM games actually need is to play the games, measure the performance, measure the latency, measure the 1% and 0.1% lows, and see if it has a substantial impact on performance. So this has been the RX 570. Let's take a look at the 3GB GTX 1060 and see how much that 3GB of VRAM is really a limitation at 1080p at ultra detail. Well, let's see here. We're getting 88, 89 frames per second. Doesn't seem to be a big issue yet. Of course, this is one spot in one place in the game. It doesn't necessarily reflect performance, but I can tell you I've tested this game on a variety of different cards over the last 6 months. It really isn't an issue. Graphics card usage, 99%. We are in fact primarily limited by our graphics card. You would be running at a higher frame rate if we had a faster graphics card. The temperature of this card, notice, is quite a bit cooler than that RX 570. This is an MSI Gaming X factory overclock card. It is a wonderful card that runs very cool. Look at the fan speed, 782 RPM. This thing is utterly silent. I have this i7 machine on the desk 2 feet away from me when I'm making these videos. This card is utterly silent. In fact, the case fans, the liquid cooler in there is far noisier than the fans on this card are. Will it overclock faster than this speed? Yes. Now this is the speed it runs out of the box, which is a boost speed even above the factory boost speed. 1936 megahertz is not the speed this card ships at. That is NVIDIA's GPU boost auto overclocking the card. It will go higher. Go into MSI Afterburner, NVIDIA cards use an offset, type plus 65 into the clock speed in MSI Afterburner. If you have a Gaming X or other similar card with a big heatsink and good fans, it's going to run at 2 gigahertz without a problem. I have more than 6 different GTX 1060 cards. Every one of them runs everything perfectly fine at 2 gigahertz. So why do I not have the plus 65 typed in? I test cards in out-of-the-box configurations. I believe the vast majority of people buy a graphics card, put it in their machine, turn it on, use it, and never ever touch it. The number of people who open MSI Afterburner, type in a plus 65 offset, press enter, and keep it loaded is probably in the very low single digits. Yes, people do it. Yes, I'm sure at least one person watching this video goes, come on, man, I have always done that for years. What's wrong with you? Great. You have. Most people don't. And so I test what you will get out of the box. Hey, if you're comfortable with overclocking, do it. You'll get nothing but better performance. At least you'll get this out of the box. Now it's time to drive like a crazy person across this map. I don't think I'll survive very long as I drive like a crazy person. Maybe I'll hop out and run towards them. Run, Forrest. I am honestly not very good at this game. I never see the enemies coming, quite frankly. I play this for benchmarking. I don't play this outside of benchmarking. I am no good at this whatsoever. Most of the time, I die from an enemy I never see. And maybe that's normal and what have you not. It's not a game that I'm really into, but I test it for benchmarking because everybody wants to see it. So if you watch my terrible gameplay, well, that's just me. Please go nice and gentle on me in the comments. Yes, I know I'm a noob. Now, VRAM usage is 2.8 gigabytes. Notice that we are running at 90 frames per second. It really isn't an issue. Main system RAM, about 8 gigabytes. As I said before, get yourself 16. It is much better. I really don't have anything else to say about this. It's very smooth. Yes, the map's different, but as I said before, I've tested this on a variety of machines. I tested this between the Ryzen 7 and the i7 earlier a few months ago when the Ryzen 7 came out. I've tested it on the CyberPower PC. I have tested this game dozens of times. It is not as sensitive to VRAM as many people think, not at 1080p. Now 1440p may be a different matter, but frankly at 1440p I'd recommend a GTX 1070 or AMD's upcoming Vega CPU. So this is the GTX 1060 3GB card. What about the RX 580? This is an awesome card. This is the Gigabyte Aurora's factory overclock top-end card, 1425 megahertz. This is a massive overclock, and yet the fan is only turning at about 1200 RPM at 36%. Now the card is warm, but 70 degrees is pretty normal for RX cards. They do tend to run a bit warm. This card will overclock further. I've had it at 1500 megahertz at 50% fan speed. It's not an issue. This has huge oversized fans, a big oversized radiator. It is tall, it is double thick, it's larger than a 2-slot card. So if you have a tight case or a tight fit, this isn't going to fit. But if you've got a mid-tower case, this is going to fit very well. It runs very cool and very quiet because it's got such a big heatsink. Now this card is not 220 or 230, it's closer to 270. Why? Because it's an overbuilt card with better quality components, a massive factory overclock, and just basically a very nice design. It's got RGB lighting, and it's sort of their premium top-end product. On a dollar to performance basis, on a dollar per frame, this card is not as good of a deal as the $220 or $230 RX 580 8GB base cards that run at 1340 megahertz. You don't buy this card just for the performance. Part of it's that you're paying a small premium, but the other reason you're getting it is lower noise profile, better chance at even further overclocking, the big fans, the RGB lighting, and simply because you want the most premium product, perhaps because you want to play on a FreeSync monitor, and currently in April of 2017, this is the fastest graphics card from AMD that you really can buy. Now there is the upcoming Vega card, and if you want to play at 1440p, I would recommend waiting for that if you prefer AMD. Otherwise, just buy a GTX 1070. But sometime in the next maybe 2 months, I'm thinking that we're going to get Vega. Now I have no information. I've not gotten a press briefing or any advanced knowledge on Vega. I have asked AMD repeatedly, and their response has always been the same. Just wait. Not yet. We're not ready to talk yet. Fair enough. Due to leaks, they tend not to share this information until just before launch. I don't honestly expect to get a press briefing much more than about 2 weeks before launch. Sometimes they only do it a week before launch. And of course, even then, I'm not going to tell you about it until I'm allowed to because of non-disclosure agreements. But they did give me the briefing on the 500 series. They did send me the 550, the new RX 550 entry-level $79 card, which I am incredibly grateful for. By the way, full disclosure, the 570 and the 580 you're watching in this video, I bought off of Newegg myself. AMD did not send me these cards. I asked for cards, but they had run out. I kind of entered the process a bit late. Not their fault at all, but they didn't have any extra cards to send me, so I did order these two and one other RX 570 because I was frankly not really happy with the single fan mini ITX card. I've got an Asus Republic of Gamers Strix card, which is much nicer. Way too expensive for the money at $190, but I need something to test and benchmark with that's better than that Sapphire mini ITX card. In any case, this card runs this game very, very nicely. Now, one question that's bound to be asked is, why in the world am I testing this in DirectX 11? Isn't Battlefield 1 one of those great DirectX 12 games that'll make these AMD cards shine? Not really. The performance difference between DirectX 11 and DirectX 12 is more hype than reality, at least in current games. There are exceptions. Vulkan, which isn't DirectX 12 but kinda in Doom, does make a difference. Okay, that's kind of about it. It's not there yet. It will be in the next year or 3. The other issue is the benchmarking tools haven't caught up yet. Fraps doesn't support DirectX 12, and I use Fraps for all of my game testing. There are a handful of kind of sort of tools that support DirectX 12 testing, but they are a pain in the neck to use. And if I use them in only DirectX 12 titles, then I'm introducing 2 different testing methodologies. If I introduce those tools and use them for everything, I'm doubling my workload. It is more work to use those tools. They're command line. They're not very user-friendly. So for the moment, I'm sticking with Fraps. When DirectX 12 starts to make a serious difference, I will find something to switch to. But at the moment, it doesn't make much difference. One of the comments that I see repeated over and over and over is, the GTX cards are perfect for DirectX 11 games, but if you want to play DirectX 12, you have to get the AMD RX. They're far superior for DirectX 12 games. Yeah, not really. Yeah, a little bit, maybe, perhaps, if the game's been optimized for the AMD cards. The truth of the matter is it takes a certain amount of hardware to display frames. It takes a lot of optimization to get there. And as long as games still have a DirectX 11 mode, there's a limit to how much optimization can happen unless the game developer puts forth a ton of effort. And let's be honest, Electronic Arts, Ubisoft, etc. are not known for putting in tons of optimization effort, are they? Until games go exclusive DirectX 12, it's an add-on, it's a patch, it's a feature list. Now, those of you who were around back in the days when DirectX 10 and DirectX 11 were new, lots of DirectX 9 games love to advertise, hey, look, we now have a DirectX 10 mode. We now support DirectX 10. Yes, they did. They had a checkbox that let you select DirectX 10. And it very rarely made a substantial difference because the games were designed for DirectX 9. And since the game still had to run on Windows XP, which didn't support DirectX 10, nothing was going to change until games dropped Windows XP support. We're in the same situation with DirectX 12 now. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, there's a few minor things, but here's the thing. Windows 7, which still currently has half of the entire PC market, does not support DirectX 12, and it never will. Because of that, game developers are never going to optimize their games for DirectX 12 when half or more, actually more, because Windows 8 is another quarter of the market, does not support DirectX 12. Windows 7 support does not end until 2020. My opinion, and please keep in mind that my crystal ball is slightly fuzzy and my Magic 8 Ball is in the shop for repairs, so this is simply a guess based upon past behavior of game companies and Microsoft. We are not going to see serious DirectX 12 development until 2020. When Windows 7 support ends, people are finally going to start moving in mass, either to Windows 10 or Windows 11 or whatever comes after that. Windows 8 will slowly dwindle over time just through attrition because, hey, it's Windows 8, and if you're okay with Windows 8, Windows 10 isn't that bad. Putting that issue there, what I will say is that in the useful lifetime of the GTX 1060 and the RX 580 cards, the reality is I don't believe DirectX 12 is going to be that big of a deal. It will slowly gain in acceptance. We will at some point in the next 2 or 3 years see DirectX 12 exclusive titles, but not that many, because the minute you make one, you've eliminated anyone who's not on Windows 10. Okay, speech over. That's my opinion. It's totally okay if you disagree with me. I have no secret special super vision into the future. I could be completely wrong, but that's my take on the market as it stands now. We'll see how it turns out. Ask me in 3 years, I'll let you know then. Here we are on the GTX 1060 6GB card. This is the EVGA for the win 2-fan ACX 3.0 cooler card running at a solid 2 GHz. This thing is absolutely awesome, and it's finally at a price that's worth buying. This card came out at $300 last year, and I basically said at the time, don't bother, it's a complete waste of money, and it was at that price. This card is now under $230. In fact, this card is within spitting distance of the 3GB cards. If you're going to buy a GTX 1060 in 2017, I recommend you get the 6GB card because not only do you get the extra VRAM, which will matter over the next 3 years, you also get 10% more speed, and frankly, the price difference between the 3GB cards and the 6GB cards is down to about $30, give or take. Now, this is a little bit more than some of the cheapest 6GB cards, but it's a very nice card. It runs really fast. Look at our fan speed, 2 GHz clock speed on our chip. We're running at 31% at 950 RPM. This card is also completely silent, just like the MSI Gaming X. Now, the MSI Gaming X makes a 6GB version, and it'll run at 2 GHz as well. If you want black and red, buy the MSI Gaming X. If you want the black and gray look, buy the For the Win. If you want the orange and the black look from Gigabyte, buy it. Gigabyte has some very nice GTX 1060 cards as well. Performance is roughly the same between the cards. The larger the heatsink and the larger the fans, generally the quieter the card is, but it doesn't really change performance unless you manually overclock, and do keep in mind we're talking a few frames per second. Look at that, we're getting 90 frames per second running around on this very busy map with lots of stuff going on. We're only using 3 gigs of VRAM on this map. It's interesting. Some of the maps use more, some use less. This one's using 3, so it's not a big deal. You can see our CPU usage there is about 56-57% depending upon what we're doing. It dips here when the main map pulls up, and we're using 8 gigs of RAM. At ultra detail at 1080p, both the RX 580 and the GTX 1060 6GB play this game very, very nicely. Don't be alarmed at the transition. We're still on the 1060 6GB card. I'm just fast forwarding to later in the battle. In fact, you can see the progress on the scorecard up at the top. Why? Just to show you a different section. I don't want to leave that little of any one card, any one gameplay in the video, but frankly, I kind of said all I really had to say. So I'm fast forwarding here. I'll put another minute of footage in so you have something else to watch. Why? Because if you wanted a 3-minute video with charts, you'd have gone to a web page. You wouldn't come to YouTube. I believe, this is my opinion, but I believe you come to YouTube because you want to see live gameplay. Not just built-in benchmark, which I do use occasionally, but I don't like. Not just to see charts and a talking head, but because you want to see the game being played. Real-time frame rate, real-time performance numbers, temperatures, fan speeds. Look at our CPU usage. 64-63%. This is where those extra threads from the i7 over the i5 come into play. Or a Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7 if you prefer. Take your pick, it runs fine on both machines. Now, Battlefield 1 plays fine on i5s. It's rough on i3s and Pentium G4560s, which are 2-core, 4-thread chips, but it does run on them. Ideally, you want a 6 or an 8-core chip, or at least an 8-thread chip, such as an i7. It's smoother. Not faster, smoother. Average frame rates between an i5 and an i7 are not that different. Minimums and 1% lows are, and we definitely are entering the time where this makes a difference. The Division, Ghost Recon, Wildlands especially, I see using 6 cores all the time. Now, I did this series of tests on the i7 7700K because I frankly hadn't done enough videos with it, and I'm doing some more videos to put something in its playlist. Moving forward, especially when I switch to the high-end cards, such as a GTX 1080 or 1080 Ti, or AMD's upcoming Vega, I'm probably going to switch to either a Ryzen 5 1600 or the Ryzen 7 1700. I haven't decided yet. I'll play around with it and see if any of the games make any... I haven't seen any difference so far, but I will do a comparison between those at some point. But so far, everything I've played between the Ryzen 5 and the Ryzen 7 has identical performance, so long as the clock speed is the same. At least with the Ryzen 7, you get better Windows productivity performance and perhaps some future-proofing. Whether or not that will matter within the 3 to 5 year useful lifetime of those chips, I don't know. The deal is the R5 1600, $220, cooler included, run it at 3.7 gigahertz out of the box on a $100 B350 board for $320 total package price, motherboard, cooler, chip, 6 cores, 12 threads, Broadwell E i7 6800K performance for half the price. That is an unbelievably good screaming deal. I love that chip. And I will be doing a full build video on the non-X chip, the Ryzen 5 1600 in a B350 board. That is a great processor. Now that is enough talking. To the results. Battlefield 1 1080p ultra detail. The green bars are the average frame rate. 80, 98, 94, and 96. Even that cheap RX 570 does an average of 80 frames per second. But averages are deceptive because you can get some really low minimums if you're not careful. This video series, I am introducing 1% minimums and 0.1% minimums. Short explanation of what that means. The red bars are the minimum frame rate you'll get 99% of the time. So 99% of all the frame rates are going to be above the red bars. 99.9% of all the frame rates will be above the blue bars. Those are the 0.1% minimums. That is a very, very, very small fraction of the total frames. So 58 frames per second, 99% of the time on the cheapest RX 570 available on the market. Then 71, 68, and 75 on the other 3 cards. Now, one question you might be asking is, wait a minute, why is the average frame rate of the 3 gig card faster than the 6 gig card? Different map, different battle, different circumstance. I'd have to run a dozen different battles on every card, averaging all the results to actually smooth those differences out. That would be a project and a half. Here's the thing, frame rates are going to vary 5 to 10 frames per second plus and minus from these numbers depending upon the map, the battle, and the circumstance. Here's the reality. The 3 bottom cards here, the 2 GTXs and the RX 580, will maintain about 60 frames per second 99% of the time on Battlefield 1 at ultra detail. The RX 570 will maintain probably at least 50 frames per second 99% of the time across all the maps. My recommendation? Buy the 2 bottom cards. They're currently the deal on the market today for the price that it's at. Want to play at 1440p? Turn the detail down to high, and the RX 580 and the GTX 1060 6 gig will do just fine. Or just buy a upcoming Vega or GTX 1070 and then play it ultra and not worry about it. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with that big huge button directly below this video, questions and comments below the video, and as always, check out that video description. Links to everything mentioned in here will be down there. Links to my i7 7700K build video, full playlist will be down there. Links to Amazon and Newegg will be down there, and links to my Patreon account will be down there. Do you like my channel? Do you find my in-depth analysis interesting and useful? Do you want to see more of this? Consider becoming a Patreon, support me, and it will let me stay independent and keep making great videos for you. Even if you only have $1 to contribute each month, it's greatly appreciated and helps more than you might think. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.